Alright, we need to graph cosine of x over 2 and to be sure to show at least 2 full periods. Okay, so thinking about the scale of my graph here, this is almost the cosine graph, which this was the cosine graph. I would probably make this go up to 1, this down to -1. Because the amplitude's 1, I'm not really worried about it going above 1 or -1, and because it's not being shifted up or down. But the one thing that is different about this compared to its parent function is the parent function has a value of 1 for b, and this has a value of 1/2 for b. So that can affect phase shift if you're shifting it left or right, but since I'm not adding or subtracting anything to x, that's not happening this time. And then the other thing, of course, is period. So period is how often the graph repeats, and for sine and cosine, it will be 2 pi over b. So in this question, 2 pi over 1/2. And dividing by 1/2 is the same as multiplying by 2. So that means if the period is 4 pi, we have to change our units so that it still has the same pattern, but it takes more space to show off that full cycle. Okay, so what I like to do is I always like to sketch the parent function first anyway. So let's maybe do this in blue. So cosine x hits the y-axis here because the cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Cosine of pi is -1. Cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. And then back to where we started. Okay, and let's copy that over here. Okay, so you can see that the period of this graph is 2 pi. If I start measuring here, I have to go this far before I can see this full pattern of down, down, up, and back to where you started. This has a distance of 2 pi. Now I want the same thing to happen for this graph, but I want it to have a distance of 4 pi to show that. Well, I'm actually just going to kind of cheat here. I'm not going to regraph anything. I'm just going to change the units on my x-axis. So instead of calling this 2 pi, I'm going to say that's 4 pi, which of course makes this 2 pi, which makes this 1 pi, 3 pi, -1 pi, -2 pi, -3 pi, -4 pi. Okay, so now it looks exactly the same. And the period from start of the cycle to end of the cycle takes a distance of 4 pi, and then that is what you get. Now, if you wanted to put both the parent function and this one on the same graph, then of course there would need to be some distinctions. But just by changing the units here, I'm able to get the cosine of x over 2 graphed in.